everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about how you can do well in your psychology undergraduate degree. So this video is aimed for those of you doing your undergrad at the moment and also those of you going into your first year. Now I know starting your degree can be so daunting. I've been there and I was terrified. So in this video I'm going to try and cover my tips for lectures, coursework, seminars, exams and give you a few study tips. I've also answered a bunch of your questions that you submitted over on Instagram, so stay tuned for that at the end. But with all that being said, let's get into the video. So in terms of preparing for your lectures, I would always recommend doing the assigned reading prior to the lecture, because then you have some like background knowledge, you can ask questions within the lecture. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't always do my reading, but we're going to aim for like the best version of you in this video. So in order to be the best version of you during your psychology undergrad, I would say to do your reading before your lecture so that you have that basic knowledge and understanding before going in. There are loads of different ways on how you can approach lectures and note taking. So my preferred way was to do it online, and that way you don't lose anything and it's all stored safely, especially when it comes to revision. You want all of your notes to be there. I would have the lecture slides up on my laptop on one side of the screen, and then on the other side of the screen I would have a Word document where I'd write my notes. For me personally, I found that in terms of revision and revisiting my notes, it was way easier for me to have a Word document, because then you can turn your Word document into a revision pack, so you can fill in the blanks or create questions from the notes that you've made. So just to give you some context, I graduated from my degree 2.5, 3 years ago now. I studied at the University of Sussex and I got a 2-1. And in terms of organising my lecture notes, lecture readings and all of that, I would have a folder on my laptop for each module, and then within that module I'd have another folder with all of the different lectures, and then within that folder of the lectures I would have the essential reading, the PowerPoint slide and then a Word document. And that made revision so much easier, because what I found was that some exams would only cover certain lectures. So if all of my lectures and my notes were all in one folder, it was more of a hassle to kind of like go through and hunt down the material needed. Most universities do record their lectures now, and especially because of COVID, I'm guessing they're all pretty much recorded. But save those recordings because it's so useful for revision. Get an external hard drive, save them on there and you'll be sorted for revision season, because then even if your notes aren't that great, because we all have those days when we're lazy, it's a 9 AM lecture or even worse, a 4 PM lecture. And we don't want to take notes at that point, do we, really? So being able to look back on these recordings is so handy, and you can make even better notes. Seminars, everyone's favourite thing. With seminars, right, they are normally there for you to have a discussion with your peers, and no one really uses it as that. I mean, I think everyone's quite shy. It's not like the movies where everyone's like, yes, I've got this very interesting thought about this, and then someone else comes in and is like, no, I think you're wrong based on this chapter or blah blah blah. It's not like that, and I think part of that is because no one really comes prepared. It's the worst thing when you turn up to a seminar and you have no idea what's going on. So do your reading before your seminars. Now, how do you read the readings in the most efficient and critical way? So when you're reading these pieces of writing, you shouldn't just be reading them and being like, okay, cool, great. You need to be writing notes, writing down any questions that come up, and writing any pieces of critique that you've thought of. So I always like to return to the acronym of APFCC, which stands for Aim, Procedure, Finding, Conclusion, and then Critique. And what I find is that when you have this structured way, when the lead of the seminar is asking you questions, it's really easy for you to skim through. So highlight, annotate and bring that along with you, along with your notes and along with your questions. When we speak about critiquing research, what we mean is to think about its strengths, its weaknesses, how it could be applied in everyday life. So really returning to all of the stuff that we learn at A-level about like validity, reliability, and bring that in. And I think the biggest tip that I can give you for your seminars is to not be afraid to speak up. And I know it's way easier said than done to like, don't be scared to talk. But these seminars are there for you, and honestly, if you just commit to saying one thing per seminar, then you're good. At least you're adding to the conversation, because there's nothing worse than sitting in a seminar and the seminar leader asking a question and no one replies. Like, I can't. I would rather say something than sit in that silence, honestly. So just try and be that person to encourage conversation, because it's your time, it's your money. Remember, you are paying for these lectures and seminars, so if that doesn't motivate you, then honestly I don't really know what will. Right, with coursework, a lot of your grade is going to come from preparation and organisation. Now, when I say that, I mean uni is full on. You have multiple modules, you have extracurriculars going on, you have a part-time job potentially. And so organisation is going to be key for you to do well in your coursework, because coursework tends to be things like lab reports or essays, or even reflective journals and things like that. And with lab reports and essays, there's a lot of groundwork before actually writing the thing. So the way that I like to begin coursework is to do a literature review on the topic. So I like to read more contemporary articles, and then also articles that have formed the theory. This will then provide me with a database for my argument. So when you're reading these articles, make sure you're reading critically and think about what they can add to your argument. Once you have formed your argument for your essay or for your introduction section of your lab report, you need to construct a narrative of how you got there. So what is the beginning theory, and then what other articles and what points did they make that landed you to that point, because then that gives you quite a nice structure. But if you are really struggling, then unis tend to have like workshops or sessions where they do like lab report writing skills or essay writing skills, which are more generic, so they're not like psychology focused, but they will be helpful for you if you are struggling in the first few months of your study. And another tip which I really relied on during my dissertation is, for writing lab reports or your research project, look at previous lab reports and the way that they write it, use the kind of language that they're using, and think about the structure that they're using, and literally just like use that as your template. Now obviously when you are using those for your template, make sure they are using an APA format. So I think most people are either coursework people or exam people. Like, I'm definitely an exam person, and so I feel like I've got really effective study habits in order to do well in exams. So by my final year actually, I decided to choose modules that were more exam heavy versus coursework heavy. Definitely reflect on your own skills and abilities and your preferences. So when I speak about revision for exams here, I'm speaking about when you have, I'm not talking about cramming, but I could do a whole video on cramming for exams, because final year, guys, you just get into such bad habits. But for this video, we're talking about the best version of you. So this is you who is very prepared and organised. This person will have rewatched all of the lectures prior to even starting revision. So this is where organisation comes in. When revising for exams, you should start like months in advance, I think. I like to rewatch the lectures so that I'm kind of like getting in the zone. I then like to create from my lecture notes a revision pack. So that tends to be my lecture notes, but just more filled in with more detail. I then go over the readings and make flashcards from those readings, and then I make flashcards on my revision notes. So to do this, I will look through my notes and create questions from the things that I have written. So say if the topic is on the theory of planned behaviour, then one of my flashcards will say, what is the theory of planned behaviour? And then what is an alternative to the theory of planned behaviour? And then that way you're really focusing on your recall rather than your recognition, which is so key when preparing for exams. Always aim for recall and not recognition. After you have made and obviously learnt your flashcards, you need to put this knowledge into practice. You need to do practice exams to know where your knowledge is lacking, and then you can go back and revisit your flashcards. So you'll end up in this cycle of flashcards, practice exam, flashcards, practice exam. And then if there are topics that you're really struggling on, you'll go back to your notes or you'll go back to the lecture and rewatch the lecture. So by doing this, you know that you can not only digest the information, but you can then express all of that information onto paper when the time comes in an exam. Exam anxiety can ruin us, and it can really take away from our grades. And so to eliminate that, confidence is key, and confidence comes from knowing your... I'm not going to mention how you can do well in your dissertation or your research project, because I think that could be a whole video in itself, so let me know if you want that video. I think my overall tip for university is organisation, because there's a lot of stuff. University is meant to be fun. You're meant to be going out with your friends, you're meant to be trying out new things, you're meant to be exploring your new city that you're living in, and then also doing well in like your coursework and exams. So you need to be very organised. So make sure you're time blocking, use a calendar, use a paper diary. If you haven't already, get yourself a good paper diary. I'll leave a link down below to the one that I use by BusyBee. I absolutely love it. Now, it is an affiliate link and I have worked with BusyBee before, but this video is not sponsored. I just genuinely love their paper diaries and all of their organisation stationery, to be honest. It's incredible. So check them out below. But now we're going to get on to the Q&A. So the first question is how to make the most out of your supervisor for your dis. I think to book regular time in, I used to have half an hour every week with my supervisor to just check in to see if I needed any extra support. If there were occasions where I needed an hour, then that was fine too, but to just keep in contact with them all the time. No question is stupid. They're there for a reason and they're experts in their field. And make sure when you do go see them to have a list of questions so that you're ready to ask all of them, that you're not wasting your time and their time. Does the quality of undergraduate education impact psychology career as a whole? I mean, to a degree, yes and no, because I think you obviously need to do well in your undergraduate degree in order to do well in your career later on. But within the content of your undergraduate degree, it has to be accredited by the BPS. So the quality tends to be ensured by that fact. So when you are looking for your undergraduate course, make sure it's BPS accredited. How to get 70 plus in essays? Honestly, I wouldn't know. I didn't get 70 plus. I think I got 70 in a few of my essays, but for the majority of them I got 65. But I guess the most helpful thing for me to say is to really prioritise your time, your reading and your proofreading. A lot of your arguments will come from the reading that you do when preparing for your writing, so focusing on that. How many years did it take for you to graduate? So I did a normal psychology undergraduate course with a placement year, so that meant I had a 4-year course because one of those years I was actually doing a placement. How to keep in touch with lecturers? So I didn't really keep in touch with my lecturers that much. I only kept in contact with one of them, who is my reference for most of my kind of like applications and things. So I just drop him an email here and there saying, hi, how are things going? I saw that he had become the head of the psychology department, so I congratulated him on that. So not checking on him that often, but definitely asking whether it's okay for me to put him down as a reference and checking in to see how things are. In first year, how is the workload? I think in first year, workload really wasn't my priority, but I think it is quite manageable at first. They like to ease you in. There's definitely kind of a bridging period between your A-level and your undergrad, so in terms of that I think it's way more manageable in comparison to say third year. I say between second year and third year there is quite a jump. Final year, so many modules and dissertation, how to manage time. So in my last vlog I actually went over all of my tips for organisation and time management, so check that out. But I would say the main thing for me is to time block and to use things like the Pomodoro technique and to be quite strict with your time and acknowledge that you will have to let some things slide one week and some things will have to take a priority in other weeks. Someone's asked for dissertation advice. Actually, a few of you have asked for dissertation advice. I'll cover that in a separate video, I think. I'm mostly a high 2-2 student, but I don't know how to get a high 2-1 or first class. Any tips? My first tip is to ask your lecturers or people marking your work, because they will know the specifics, but it tends to be more about the critiquing of research. And there are some good websites on how to critique research. I'll link them down below, but my favourite is the CASP checklist. So I think that tends to be the difference between a 2-2 and a 2-1. But another helpful tip is to actually look at the marking criteria to see what the difference is between a 2-2 and a 2-1. Highlight that and focus in on that and practice that. How to balance uni while getting experience. Now, I think with this you have to give yourself some grace, and when I say that, I worked part-time for the whole of my degree, but when you are doing that you have to just let yourself not get the highest grade. There is no way in heck that you are going to be able to get a first while balancing 3 part-time jobs. It's impossible and it's really hard. I mean, you probably could, but then your mental health would slip and your well-being would slip. You wouldn't be happy in the process. So my priority was always going through uni happily and healthily, and so that meant I knew I wasn't going to get a first, which is okay. And so just accepting that and really being structured with your time, organisation and preparing. Preparation is key. Try to do things in advance so that you aren't getting stressed out in the process. What extracurricular activities should you do while undertaking your degree? I think getting a part-time job as a healthcare assistant or support worker is great. Even trying to be in a leadership role if you're doing any clubs. What is it called again? What's that thing when you're part of like clubs, like societies? There we go. Try to lead some societies as well, because that will show that you have good leadership skills. Although I was never part of any societies, I would probably prioritise the paid work experience. How much studying do I recommend? It's really hard because you never know how long the readings will be for each week, but I would always aim to always do the readings. Now that can tend to be like an hour to 2 hours, and I think it's more important to think about the things that you need to cover and then managing your time in that way, rather than trying to cram in loads of stuff into like 1 hour, if that makes sense. Should we focus more on getting good grades or volunteering/working? I think you need a bit of both. I'll say this now because of my own experience, but you do not need a first to do well in your psychology career. I got a 2-1 and I'm now going on to the doctorate, and I think that's happened because of the experience that I had. So I think you have to have a good balance, but if you know that you're not going to be able to balance working and then also getting a 2-1, then don't work. You need to prioritise your grades, I think, in that case. But I would try and get a part-time job. What are the assignments like, and are they essay based, and how many assignments do you have typically in a month? So assignments tend to be essays or lab reports. Well, they were for me, and I know that this can depend on the university that you're at. In my final year we did have a reflective piece where we had to do a reflective journal each week. Now in my first and second year, you normally had probably 1 piece of coursework per module per term. So that is kind of like, what, one assignment every 3 months. But then obviously you have multiple modules. So it's about like balancing your time again, being aware of the assignments you have and planning ahead. Tips on balancing working with college work so your grades don't slip. Again, it's about time management and time blocking. If you know that you have a 4-hour shift, then block that into your day and then realise that you're going to have to do your studying later on or before work, and being strict with that, but also being strict with your work and telling them that you can't do any overtime during exam period or during a period where you've got loads of coursework. So being very protective over the time that you have, I think, is my best tip. When you're told be more critical, what does it mean? I've asked my markers but I'm still lost. So when people tell me to be more critical, I like to think of like pros and cons of the piece of writing that I'm reading, and also the way that it can be used in every day. How can that research benefit clinical work, or how can it benefit policy making? Thinking wider about why this research is written, because when we read research at university we can forget that actually this research is going to form practice a lot of the time. So what is good about this piece of research? What isn't good? Why can we trust it? Why can't we trust it? And even thinking about the way that they're writing, is it concise? Is it accessible? All of those things. So I think in the most basic terms it's a pro and con list in my eyes. I'm going into second year and I've been told that there are not enough hours in the day to complete all the work that we should be doing. How do you manage that kind of workload? I mean, I hate when people do that. I hate when people try and scare either undergrads off or even like aspiring psychologists off because of the workload. I think you'll know how to handle it when you're there. Please don't go in afraid. You have got this. Go in with the mentality of you are there for a reason. You will be able to do it. But what I like to do is write down a big list of all of the things that I need to do each week and try to time block. Time blocking is your best friend. It's my best friend, and I want you all to implement it because honestly it changed my life. Knowing how much time you have in a day and then knowing how much work you have to do within a certain amount of time and trying to plan around that. All of it is about planning. Yes, it may feel like some days time is running away from you, but you just have to rejig things. So say if you're someone who goes to the gym every day, maybe there'll be a day where you can't go to the gym, and that is okay. How to write more concisely. I have a massive issue with this, but when you reread your work, when you're proofreading, think about whether you can come to the point in less words or whether you've restated points again and again. Because then that's not writing concisely. So I guess it's being very strict about your writing. You can even go through and highlight your piece of work so that you know what parts are like your point and what parts are your critique and what parts are your references. If you see that you've got too many of each colour within one section, then you know that you maybe have repeated yourself. How to find good journal articles. Google Scholar, my friend, and look at the ones that have been mostly cited, because those tend to be like the more popular articles. So when they say that they've been cited, it just means that other people have used them in their research articles. On Google Scholar, if you click on cited, then it will come up with all of the articles that have cited that article, which can then lead you on to more helpful pieces of research. How much should I read and what should I read? So again, you'll be given essential reading as part of your degree, so read that. And then just do general literature reviews. How to include evidence from studies in a question. So if you have a question about, I don't know, like for psychological interventions for schizophrenia, then you would have different points. So your first intervention, maybe say CBT. Then you would go on to speak about strengths and weaknesses of CBT. And when you speak about these strengths and weaknesses, you need articles to back you up. Otherwise, it's just you talking. So if one of the strengths is that it's very time limited, and that can be quite helpful, then you need to bring in a study that shows the strength of why time limited work is helpful. And that's how you would bring research in. So those are all of the questions that you guys asked me. Thank you all for submitting your questions. Please give this video a like if you liked it. Undergrads, please leave any video requests down below and I'll try to get round to doing them. It's been a hot minute since I was doing my undergraduate degree, so I've kind of forgotten like what would have been helpful for me, so please let me know down below. If you did like this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content like this, and until next time guys, I will see you later. Bye.